What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Body Lock Podcast. This marks episode number 37, and again, we're a couple days late here. We've had some unforeseen technical difficulties, but now we're back in action. We're not going to waste any more time. Due to those technical difficulties, we don't have Siri Kari's video feed, but he is still here for the audio version. If you're purely listening to the podcast, Siri, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great, man. I'm not thrilled about my webcam just deciding that it didn't want to work. And apparently it's a Windows update. So guess what, guys? This is the one time, as someone who comes from a computer family, and yes, I'm Indian, I know that's stereotypical, and someone whose name is Siri and had to put up with the jokes. This is the one time I'll say, Apple, maybe you had a point. So that's the little oasis of compliments I give you in the barren desert. That is my opinion of that company's products. I'm sure they're fine. I just don't like them. Anyways, but yeah, no, back to your original point. I'm doing great, man. What about you?
All right, look at that, Siri being charitable to Apple of all companies, giving them some leeway. I've been good, just kind of back and forth, and we kind of got debated this week with the Floyd Mayweather tension news, but we'll get into that a little bit later on.
Two words is that the combination of?
Huh?
Jebaited. What's the two words we're combining?
Jebaited is normal slang for Overwatch League of Legends player. League of Legends player base. I can't remember what exactly coined it, but it's a mixture of it's just baited and juked, so it's jebaited. So it's stupid.
See, I thought it was something vaguely dirty, which is why I had to verify. But okay, no, that works. Fair enough.
We're keeping it PG here. But let's first get into the UFC 230 recap, which was such a great night, full of good moments that are worthy of the MSG praise, and moments that are emblematic of what that arena means. Starting first and foremost with Daniel Cormier. I mean, what else can you say about this guy? For me, he's on the Mount Rushmore of UFC guys that are clean. You know what I'm saying? He's untainted by all the other scandals that some of the greatest fighters that the sport has ever seen are getting affected by. He's a champion inside and outside of the cage, and what I mean by that is that he's a great father and a husband, and then on top of that, he is the guy that we all know as Daniel Cormier, the beast that he is, and he comes out and does, I wouldn't even call it putting on a clinic. It's more of styling, because I really think, like, with the overmatched, it seems at times that with how overmatched Daniel Cormier seems to be at times, he doesn't really get to show off his wrestling chops, because he's going against elite level athletes pretty much every fight. And I think, and not to say that Derek Lewis isn't, but I think when it comes to showing his breadth of knowledge in the wrestling department, we hadn't seen it that good since his previous fights at heavyweight before coming down to 205, and it was just such a breath of fresh air. It looked like vintage DC. I called it back last week that I said it's going to be similar to a finish a la Rumble Johnson, where first half is a feeling out round, second round he's going to go in for the kill. He's going to find ways to establish his wrestling. And I mean, that whole final sequence from sprawl into ankle pick, moves around, grab side control, forces him onto his back. I mean, it was poetry in motion. And the author was Daniel Cormier on Saturday night, and it couldn't have gone to a better person. I think he's truly deserving of everything he's getting in his UFC career, and on top of that, his camp is phenomenal. I mean, they've breeded so many champions year in and year out, some lengthy, some not as much, but 4 champions in a stacked gym like AKA is a really good sign of success, and yeah, just congrats to Daniel Cormier.
So, did this fight go the way you thought it would?
Yeah, pretty much, like almost to a T.
Yeah, and part of it is that I think Lewis, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but he really is a power puncher first and then nothing second.
Right.
But I think, and I hate to bring in Cain Velasquez into Cormier's crowning moment, but it's a flattering comparison, I promise. Like Velasquez, he's such a good athlete that there's a certain caliber of fighter you need to be to not even win, okay, not have a chance of winning, but at least not look terrible. Like, Derek Lewis is a better fighter than Cormier made him look. you know?
Hmm.
And that is a testament to Cormier and the type of athlete and the type of wrestler he is. There's always that John Jones question, was he dirty? What happened if he actually had a game plan in that first fight instead of just running straight at him? But that Mount Rushmore, I agree. He's one of the UFC's greatest champions. And I know I crap on Conor a lot, but DC actually earned his 2 belts, He completely tore through the light heavyweight division, and while holding that belt, went up and challenged what is arguably the greatest heavyweight in UFC history, Stipe Miocic. Got him,
Yeah.
And
In the first round.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the first round, too, so, of all things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's weird to think that Lewis is the crowning achievement, like, oh, his legacy is set, because with all due respect to Derek Lewis, he's not really even close to the top caliber fighter Cormier has fought.
Mm-hmm.
He's on my Mount Rushmore, but I don't know if it'll do much to convince the critics.
Right. And it's not on, I fully believe that Derek Lewis was worthy of getting that title shot. I don't think it was a gimme fight for Daniel Cormier by any means, but a month after coming off an exhausting comeback fight against Alexander Volkov, I didn't see him winning that fight, truly and honestly. And that's more so why I gave Daniel Cormier the benefit of the doubt, on top of already being one of the most decorated fighters in the game. That was also a feather in his cap that, was not in any way, shape, or form a benefit to Derek Lewis. And he just needs more time. I definitely think you're right. He is a power puncher first and not much else second, but he's also not completely illiterate in wrestling or in jiu-jitsu or different things like that. It's just he doesn't like them. And to become a complete mixed martial artist in the sport of MMA, you have to have a knack or an understanding at the very least of all of these aspects. And there's still certain layers of Derek Lewis's game that are just not up to par. But that's, I said it the night of the fight, and I'll say it again. There's levels to this, and Daniel Cormier proves time and time again that he is at the highest level. So, is there anything else you want to say about that fight?
Nah, because I know that's the headlining fight. That's how they sell the card. But that was not who stole the show.
Right.
That co-main event, Jacare Souza versus Chris Weidman, I think is one of the best fights of the year. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people won't feel that way, but I think it really was. And man, that's the type of fight that I kind of tear up, as an old head, because they're always fighters we're fans of. And they do their thing. They never get the title shot, or they never get the title. And eventually you just see them on the downswing.
Mm-hmm.
Frankie's kind of like that. Frankie Edgar, a few years ago, if he had gotten the shot at the featherweight title, or even maybe gotten a shot at Conor, because he couldn't beat Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo had his number. Jose Aldo is the anti-wrestler. He knew how to pivot, and even though Frankie's a way better boxer, he could never do what he needed to. And then with a new champion, I was like, oh man, maybe he'll do it. Maybe he'll win a belt in 2 divisions. And now he's older and frailer, and I don't know if that can happen. Mm-hmm. Jacare Souza right there. Because when he lost to Romero, close fight. Lost to Whitaker, okay. Whitaker turned out to be the best middleweight that no one knew was the best.
Right.
But then he couldn't slug it out with Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin's got a good chin, especially at 185. But, Jacare nailed him with some right hands, and it looked like it wasn't enough anymore. He was too old to hang in there. He's got a power right, a good takedown and submission game, but I thought that's it. He's never going to do it. And he still is, he's 38. But that Jacare Souza that showed up against Chris Weidman was the best Jacare Souza of his entire career.
Right.
That striking was so good. And a lot of people are underselling it. But if you look at it, because, okay, so I know we have hindsight, so you're going to be a bit biased, but how did you see the fight going? And I don't mean just who would win, but like details, who takes what rounds, like who has the advantage where? How would you have seen that going?
Before the fight began, or as the fight was unfolding, like who I thought.
If you had to call how the entire fight goes before it starts.
Um, well, that's tough to say. I thought if it was gonna end early, I thought it would be at the hands of Jacare. Funnily enough, because he has that, that
But
instant
did you think
jiu-jitsu
that's
where.
what was going to happen?
No, I did not think that was what was going to happen. I thought Chris Weidman would use his talents to drag out a decision, honestly, over him. And I remember during the fight
Okay,
going into the
perfect.
right.
Drag out. You say drag out. So which rounds do you see him winning? Did you see him winning the earlier rounds or the later rounds against Jacare?
I saw him winning the earlier round. Like if it was 3 rounds as the fight was, it would be 1-3. I thought they'd be 1-1 going into the third, and it's a toss up to who wants it more, who can get it. But I didn't think it would be a finish if it would continue past that, and I think that's really where Jacare surprised me was his urgency to like get it done, even whether or not he knew he was up on the scorecards. It just kind of was not a scenario that I was preparing for.
Okay, I can see that. So what I thought was going to happen is Jacare is a power fighter. He's very strong, swings hard. So I thought he'll swing and miss, but ultimately he'll push Chris back and he'll win the first round on points. But Chris, smoother, better energy expenditure, almost like a Diaz brother fight. You can kind of storm them in the beginning, but as that fight goes on, they're going to drag you into deeper and deeper waters.
Right.
And I figured Weidman will do that to Jacare.
Okay.
My bad, microphone issues. Okay. But that is the exact opposite happened. First round, Jacare lands a couple body blows, a couple hard leg kicks, but mostly he's being pushed back. Chris's hands look great. That jab keeps splitting the guard up the middle. He's confusing Jacare. He's slipping the big right hands easily. He hurts him with this beautiful loose right hook that curved right around Jacare's guard. I was like, oh, wow. So I thought so he's going to take the fight. I didn't think he finished Jacare, but I said, okay, if Chris is winning the earlier rounds, there's definitely no way that Jacare is going to win the later rounds. Second round starts. Jacare starts destroying Chris's body. Maybe because, we hold it to the standard of that nasty Jose Aldo body shot on Jeremy Stevens, but those body shots hurt. And if you look at the CompuStrike, by the end of the fight, Jacare landed, I think, 23 body shots.
Wow.
Out of the 30 something that he threw. So yeah, he landed 24 of 31. And if you remember in your fight memory, I would say at least 85% of those were straight to the liver, because that's the only body shot I remember Jacare throwing. So Chris is still piecing him up with his boxing. But Jacare's right in there, and Chris can't really run away anymore. He's still rolling with the right hands, but he's not dodging them outright. When Chris clinches him, he's got the better knees, but Jacare's working his body and left with uppercuts. And all of a sudden, it's a dogfight. Jacare's still losing, but he's getting into this. And then that third round starts, and it's all Jacare. And I didn't think that was going to happen. Chris is flat-footed. He's not hurt, but he is gassed because you can't eat 20 shots to the liver and get your leg hacked and expect to be fresh by the third round.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, and that boxing was really good. Jacare didn't spam his right hand. He worked his left hook. By the way, that left hook that in that second round, I don't know if you noticed, or maybe you know now because that's what I wrote about on the site, but Chris circled to Jacare's left because Jacare has a big right hand. Robert Whittaker kind of did the same thing, and Jacare couldn't catch it. Jacare decided, okay, if I know you're always moving to my left, I'm going to throw a left hook. And he caught Chris clean on his guard. I know that's an oxymoron, clean on the guard, but like Chris couldn't roll with it, and he couldn't duck it. And he took it flush on his guard, moving into it at least 5 or 6 times. And I thought to myself, wow, for a guy that doesn't have a left hand, that's a sublime technique to kind of pull. He took this fight on short notice. Let's not forget that.
Right.
This was Luke Rockhold's fight. So on short notice, he gets a left hand he never had, and all of a sudden piecing him up. And that last round, leg kick, liver shot, right, left, just beautiful punching. Chris tries to throw a body kick elbow to kind of back Jacare up. Jacare hits him again, and that right hand. People act like, oh, Chris was wearing that damage well, and that grazing right hand got him. No, man, Chris was really badly hurt. If you look at they didn't do a good job showing the punches before the knockout because of the entire controversy with Dan Murgliata. Getting off on dead bodies.
Let's not even mention it. God damn.
But if you look at the punches before that, like Jacare dives in with a clean left hook to the jaw. They don't show it from the right angle. They show it from Chris's back. But if you look at it, that punch gets there before Chris's guard goes up, and his jaw snaps to the side. He hit him cleanly with that. And that's when he chased him down to the fence. And Chris threw that punch not because he was panicking, but he was in desperation mode. He was getting swarmed and hurt, And so Chris threw, Jacare threw, and the rest is history. And I know it's unfashionable to give title shots after one win, but with that new left hook and stuff, that fight against Whitaker, if it is Whitaker or Gastelum, is going to look way different. He might still lose, but we can convincingly say he has a shot to win. And I mean, I know that's a monologue, but that was awesome to see as a Jacare fan.
No, I mean you're perfectly in the right. You broke that down, similar to how you explained it on the article. It's a new development of tools that made this fight different, and is surely to make the next fight different. And that's one thing that I kind of touched on last week was Chris Weidman hasn't really evolved since he lost the title, and that's one thing that you could definitely say about his game with each fight leading up to beating Anderson Silva and the couple fights after that. When you say evolve,
what is it you're referring to that he should improve on? Should have improved on since he lost the title?
Well, first off, I think in some ways he's gotten better, but in other ways I see like his stand-up was never his bread and butter, but he had a deceivingly good sense of defensive footwork and timing. He was very good at expecting shots, very good at avoiding damage, kind of rolling with punches similar to Conor McGregor in the sense that he knew how to minimize damage. And I feel like in the fights since his losing streak, he's kind of lost that step where he's more so he's not waiting the strikes. He's not waiting for the strikes easily. He's kind of, on his back foot, tentative, not really fighting in a proactive manner that baits the opponent into a move. And then at that point, you're expecting that move. He just kind of, the approach isn't the same in terms of his timing, how he looks to establish his offense. He used to have very serious body kicks. I thought he was one of the strongest kickers at middleweight. Definitely not flashy, but effective. At throwing kicks to the body. Doesn't have the same kind of snap anymore. I think, and maybe it's definitely not a physical thing because he's looked in tremendous shape in his recent fights. But I think it's a mental block that he's, sure, he can do all the right motions, say all the right things, perform the right way leading up to the fight. But when, the lights beaming down on him and, he's looking at a losing streak in the face and he needs to show up in his home crowd, because how many times has he lost in New York now? It's kind of, it's almost been like a negative aspect to everything that's happened since the legalization of MMA in New York. And it sucks to say because I wish nothing but the best for Chris. I think he's one of the better examples of a mixed martial artist. In general, he's a family man. He's good for all that. But there's just something missing, and I don't even want to say it's a camp issue or anything like that. I truly think it's a mental blockage that's keeping him from staying consistent, staying the course. Because we forget this all started with the weirdest of spinning back kick attempts in the fourth round that lost him the fight against Luke Rockhold way back. So I don't know. I'm not saying that this is kind of it could be a symptom of that, but there's he's second guessing himself lately, and I don't like seeing it, but I also don't know how to make that better. I'm not in a position to to prescribe something to him, but it's definitely something that's affecting him in that realm where he's just not pulling the trigger like he used to, and which sucks because again, he is still a world-class wrestler, and he made his striking his bread and butter over the years, but now he can't rely on those same tools the same way, and it's just an unfortunate situation for him.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sad story because, I mean, just a few years ago, I was talking about Chris Weidman, that he very likely had the claim of being the greatest middleweight in UFC history.
Right.
And people consider that blasphemous because of, Anderson Silva, but yeah, it's how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah.
But what isn't a sad story is the guy that you and Jake are excited about, Adesanya. So go ahead, lavish praise upon him, speak his great deeds to the world.
I mean, what else can you say about this guy? I absolutely love Israel Adesanya. I think he does everything right, not just in the cage, but on the mic. His social media is fantastic. He edits his own videos and releases his own memes. He's transcendent, but in a different kind of way. I think he just gets his fan base more so than any MMA fighter in the game right now. I saw him recently on a podcast with can't remember, Andrew Schultz, I think his name is, and just such a funny podcast. And I'm not the biggest fan of Andrew Schultz just by himself, but man, give Adesanya the spotlight and he will deliver. He's a funny dude, great personality, and on top of all that, a badass fighter, which is mainly what we want to praise here at the TBL podcast. I mean, just breaking down that fight, I don't want to say child's play because at certain points it did look like that, but that was already once Brunson was affected by strikes. But he just keeps getting better every fight. He's going against A-class wrestler after A-class wrestler, and he's just proving that he can't be taken down. He's stepping up to the plate with every fight, and he's finishing fights, and really, if Herb Dean wanted to, he could have made him stand up 3 more times after that. Derek Brunson is as tough a guy to go through that punishment, but you don't want to subject an athlete to that, and ultimately he made the right call. But let's be honest, Israel Adesanya wasn't going anywhere. He was willing to stand there and keep dropping him if Derek Brunson would keep standing up, and I mean, just he's a highlight reel waiting to happen at this point. I was hesitant,
waiting
saying,
to happen implies that he hasn't already been on the highlight reel.
Right.
Times.
I mean, and I also am implying that it's just going to continue happening. There's no shortage of amazing when it comes to his fights. You really think, oh, he's shown all the layers. Oh, he's not that impressive. And I mean, I went on a binge just this past weekend going through his kickboxing highlights. It's its own form of drugs. Just watching him do what he does, and I don't even think he's reached that apex yet in the UFC, which is crazy to think. And I still said, even with a win on the last podcast, I said I wouldn't trust him for a title shot just yet. And I'm saying fuck all that. I want him to compete for the title and show everybody what he's made of, because I really do think he's at a level where he can embarrass a lot of people. Maybe not Whitaker to that same extent. Maybe not Kelvin Gastelum to that same extent. Maybe
These
not.
sound like fighting words, man. Because I thought I made a compelling case that Jacare gets that title shot.
Right. I mean, it's.
And to be fair, Dana White seems to feel the exact opposite of you.
Really.
Dana White said he wants to pump the brakes on Adesanya. Doesn't want to put him against too good of fighters too soon.
We'll see if WME follows up on that, because I don't know. He says he's ready, and I actually believe him, for sure.
Yeah, Brunson is a nice gatekeeper of whether or not you can compete with the best.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's a line between, say, Whitaker, Romero, I don't know if people still want to put Rockhold up there, but I would put Jacare,
mm-hmm.
and then everyone else, Gastelum, I guess. But everyone below that, Adesanya can beat for sure, and everyone above that, I would pay good money to see him try and beat.
Right. And I'm in the same boat. If he doesn't get the title shot, fine. I would love to see him against Rockhold. I'd love to see him against Jacare. I'd love to see him against Weidman. Anything. The world is his oyster at this point, pretty much at middleweight. I'm here for it. I'm on the bandwagon. If they want to do Australia versus New Zealand in Melbourne in March, I'm down for it. I just want to see him and continue, catching those highlights, because he really is capable of it.
Anything else from 230 that you want to talk about?
No, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Lyman Good. He had a great fight against Ben Saunders, and it's funny, he lost to MSG, came back, won. In last year he lost to MSG, came back this year, was able to get the win. It was just a good story, and he seemed like a great personality in his post-fight scrum. That was really all I wanted to touch on UFC 230 wise. But let's get into some previews real quick, because we do have one hell of a card coming up this weekend. You wore your Korean Zombie shirt last weekend. This week you can't show it off with well, it'd be weird if you wore it again, but you can't show it off this time around. But it's going to be Chan Sung Jung versus Yair Rodriguez. Give me what you think is going to happen, and what you're most excited about, and what fans should be excited about for this one.
So I love Korean Zombie. Him having to, his extended absence for South Korea's mandatory military service was a real bummer.
Yep.
Then getting injured, so having basically his second long layoff after coming back to decapitate Dennis Bermudez was also a bummer. So Jung is kind of rusty, but at his best. And if you wanted to see Chan Sung Jung at his best, it's not a fight that the UFC promotes very heavily, and therefore I don't think the UFC guards very well. Like, it's not one of their treasured properties.
Right.
But do you remember the fight between Chan Sung Jung and Dustin Poirier for the #1 contendership?
Yes.
No one thought he stood a chance. And Poirier lost against the best featherweights, but even for cutting tremendous amounts of weights, Poirier was cutting tremendous amount of weights. He was still a banging featherweight,
Yeah.
And that fight was so back and forth. Korean Zombie, just creative striking, vicious uppercuts, flying knees, just transitioning submission attempt to submission attempt to submission attempt. Because he hasn't fought in so long, people forget how good he is.
Yep.
And at his best, he should roll over Yair Rodriguez. I think he's a nice young up-and-comer, but there's such a yawning gap between the fighters that he's beat and the fighters that have beaten him.
Yeah.
That I don't know how to accurately gauge his skill. He's flashy, but people that are competent, the big dogs, have pretty confidently stuffed it. And so I think Chan Sung Jung can finish this fight. I think he can finish it. I don't know whether by knockout or by I'm sorry. Yair Rodriguez has only lost to one person. He's lost to Frankie Edgar.
Right.
But everyone he fought before that was Charles Rosa, Dan Hooker, Andre Fili, Alex Caceres, and the prodigy BJ Penn. Okay, that's, with all due respect to the great BJ Penn, that's a nothing list.
Dan Hooker's pretty good.
But is Hook? But the thing is that's this is the featherweight division. You know, right. Almost everyone is pretty good.
That's not true. There's Artem Lobov.
Well, he's
the
what
outlier,
the college folks call a statistical outlier. But
yeah,
and so I don't know how good he could be, but without meaning to not belittle, but perhaps undersell how good Frankie Edgar is. Korean Zombie's got more stopping power, and he is very underrated on the ground.
Right.
I do not think Yair Rodriguez can take and hold down Korean Zombie.
Yeah.
And if he stands with him, he might land a couple flashy kicks. I don't think he's going to land it hard enough to hurt Korean Zombie, and I definitely don't think he can eat what gets thrown at him. So, assuming that ring rust isn't too big of a factor, I think it should be a bloodbath in the favor of Jung.
Yeah, lately I've been trending that way. Like, the more film I watch on Chan Sung Jung, and you're right, it is recency bias. especially in his case because we haven't been able to see him compete with regularity. But he is crafty and multifaceted in his game, which is something that you can't really throw in Yair Rodriguez's basket. You know, he is an insane striking talent, a very fun fighter to watch. But Chan Sung Young has more options to work with, and on top of that, he can crack fists too, with the best of them. So I think that's how this fight is going to pan out. I could see it being a finish on the ground for Chan Sung Young, but it's definitely not going to be. We're going to see a fight on the side of Yair Rodriguez. You know, he's it's been a long time since he's been able to come back into the ring fully fit. You know, he was supposed to fight Zabit, then things happened. People were alleging him pulling out of the fight because this or that, but they do that for every fighter that pulls out of a fight. And I'm just interested to see him get back in the cage, and hopefully it's a much more mature display than that he put on against Frankie Edgar, because he did look not just overmatched, but it looked like a different league of fighting. You know, once Frankie Edgar was done with him, and we know that there's a ceiling to what Frankie Edgar can do, namely with Max Holloway and Brian Ortega. So if you can't get through him and he makes it look easy, then there's no way you're going to be competing at the top of the pile. So, and this is a good fight to test his mettle, to see where he's really at in the time that he's spent away from the game. And one way or another, it's a super amazing main event. I want to get into the co-main real quick because I think this one is going to be a lot more sinister. I don't know, and maybe that's
Donald Cerrone is the Nicolas Cage of MMA. He doesn't say no to anything.
He really, he really is the Ghost Rider of the UFC. He just pulls up. Oh, you need a guy. 2 weeks notice. I'm there. And then he just pulls up, fucking jet skiing into the venue. He's a different. A different kind of guy, which is why everyone loves him. I mean, he has a really solid fan base, and it's because he shows up. But the problem is, and especially when you're going against a guy like Mike Perry, is, and this is just me, this is like my own personal observation of Donald Cerrone, is he doesn't do good in the fights where there's kind of bad blood or there's any kind of ill will from one fighter to another. He performs best when he knows it's just two guys going at it in a competitive sense. When there's any kind of animosity, any kind of random beef between the two parties, he doesn't really show up to the plate the same way. And I think Mike Perry is going to get to him some way, somehow, with the whole Jackson Wink controversy that's happened between Mike Winkeljohn and Donald Cerrone. Mike Perry is smart. He's smart enough to get into Donald Cerrone's head, and he knows that, and especially, his former camp knows that that's a way to get at Donald Cerrone and make him perform lesser than, what we've previously seen from him. And Mike Perry just looks completely reformed. He wasn't a 3-round fighter before he went to Jackson Wink. Now he definitely is a 3-round fighter. He can take a fight at any point. If you leave your chin out, he will find it, and I think it's going to be that kind of a finish. And it's going to be one of those finishes where there's going to be a knockout, and there's not going to be there's not going to be any positive respite afterwards. I just feel like it's going to be a little tacky, a little nasty, and a bad look, for both sides, because it's going to be, I think Donald Cerrone is going to take a loss in this fight, but I also think Mike Perry is not going to look gracious in victory, and that's going to be, that's my dim forecast for this fight, but the competition itself will be amazing. That's for sure. I think both of these guys are high-octane fighters. They're capable of a lot, and Mike Perry is in need of a win as much as Donald Cerrone, so they're gonna go out and try to get it. How do you see this one playing out?
Well, okay. Mike Perry barely beat Paul Felder. That was his last win, I think.
Right.
Paul Felder is not a welterweight. As far as I'm concerned, Paul Felder was the winner of that fight. Not in the eyes of the judges, which is the only thing that counts, but in my eyes, in my praising gaze, I thought that was Paul Felder's win spiritually.
I could see that. It was a very close fight.
Well, he lost against Santiago Ponzinibbio, and he lost against Max Griffin, even Alan Jouban. He, even if his conditioning has improved, his shot selection hasn't.
Right.
And I get that. That's part of his appeal. He is to quote Joe Rogan, swinging from the bleachers kind of guy, you know? And the higher you go in MMA, the less single tricks like that work. Like, some of the greatest knockout artists and greatest submission artists never won a title or even got a title shot because it's just not enough to carry you. The thing about Donald Cerrone is this. Donald Cerrone can handle hard punchers. Donald Cerrone cannot handle good boxers. Being a good puncher and landing a lot of punches in fights does not make you a good boxer. Okay, there is a big difference.
Right.
If you can box, you can exploit Donald Cerrone's defense with little trouble. You know, that's exactly what Masvidal did. Masvidal is a really good fighter, but he hasn't sniffed a title shot in either division he's fought in for the UFC. But he had no problem making Donald Cerrone look amateur.
Right.
And then look at him against Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler hits like a dump truck. And Donald Cerrone made a fight of that. You know, and I consider Mike Perry to be more of a power puncher than a good boxer. And I don't know how he's going to do it. Maybe by volume, maybe he works Perry's body and sets up a head kick. I think Cerrone can win this.
Right.
I think this is the type of fight where he might not be the favorite going in necessarily in the eyes of many, but I think he can knock out Perry. And I think it's in his favor.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like, as much credit as I give Mike Perry for making strides in recent years, because personally, I don't think he beat Paul Felder, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Split decision.
I don't think he beats him if he didn't make that camp switch that he did that proved so vital, especially after the loss that he had to Max Griffin. But I also don't think that Cerrone beats Robbie Lawler if he still was stuck in his same situation. He has showed gains, impressive ones too, in the welterweight division, where at first I thought he'd be overmatched every fight. He really doesn't have a lot of angles to win. At least at 155 he had more of a height advantage. There were more physical advantages that he could exploit, but he's showing that he is, with each fight at welterweight, a fighter's fighter, and not just from a physical standpoint, but from an IQ standpoint. He really can put things together, and he has the ability to frustrate someone like Mike Perry. I just think again, it's gonna come from a mental advantage, not a fight advantage on Mike Perry's end. I think he's going to get into his head, he's going to frustrate him, and then once he starts landing any kind of damage, that's when, Cerrone's going to get a little bit in his head and break him. That's just how I see it going down, unless Cerrone
so
gets...
you're calling a Perry win or a
Cerrone? I'm calling a Perry win just because, I think it's going to come from a mental standpoint. I think...
Okay.
Cerrone's going to crack, unless he gets himself a sports psychologist. Who knows? He could pull something that's a little different from what we've seen before. But I just think Mike Perry's got it. No Orlando bias here. Just calling it like I see it, man. Real quick, I wanted to. Oh yeah, there was one more fight I wanted to touch on. Actually, two more fights, but we can kind of. It's not going to be as long as the other fights. Mike Trizano versus Violent Bob Ross. Luis Pena. I don't know if you've seen a lot of fights from either fighter. Mike Trizano, he won the last Ultimate Fighter, not really in exciting fashion, and Luis Pena was supposed to be in that fight that would have decided it if he could continue through the Ultimate Fighter tournament. He couldn't. He got an injury, but he still fought on that card and won a contract through getting a fight, through winning the fight on that night, and looked very, very good doing so. I just think this is the fight that should have been the Ultimate Fighter finale, and Luis Pena is finally going to get his crowning moment. He's super interesting, a great guy to listen to. He's at a wonderful camp in AKA. He's been training with the best of them. He's already a solid striker, so now he's getting that wrestling in, which is music to my ears. For anyone that's good at striking, if you're going to AKA, that's pretty much the school for you if you want to, round yourself out. And I think that's going to be a great fight. Did you have any thoughts on that one?
Not really.
The afro. The afro's gonna carry it, I'm telling you. But in the
you think
last,
it's gonna pad some of the blows?
yeah, for sure.
You just tuck that chin into your chest and just let everything glance off those glorious curls.
Right. That's how he's surviving the Khabib mauling. He's just doing it one way or the other. And the other fight I wanted to talk about was Joseph Benavidez, Ray Borg.
Yes.
This fight, I mean, first off, it was. A couple sources have claimed that they are looking to dissolve the flyweight division completely heading into 2019. And this is a flyweight fight, and these are great flyweight fighters. I don't know what to make of it. I just hope, they put on a great show to merit them keeping their contracts. I heard some fighters are going up. They're being forced to go up to bantamweight, and some fighters are being straight up cut. And I think both of these fighters deserve to get re-signed. If they have to get bumped up, they will bump up. And the rest I don't really know. What's your thoughts on that? Real quick reporting on my end and just the fight itself.
I mean, I'm upset. I'm upset from the point of an MMA purist, but I totally understand why it's happening.
Right.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I would be very surprised if the flyweight division was in fact profitable.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Or if it is profitable, if it was anywhere as profitable as the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By what margin?
With Demetrius Johnson leaving to one fighting championships, quote unquote, their biggest star is gone. And I put that in quotes because, yeah, he got the Metro PCS commercial and everything. But his biggest problem throughout his career is that even though Demetrius Johnson was so good, not enough people cared.
Right.
And with him gone, I can see them just cutting their losses. And, it sucks for the flyweights that won't make it up. But with all due respect, if you're a flyweight and the UFC is going to cut you, I don't think you were making that much money to begin with.
True.
You know what I mean?
True. Yeah.
I can't imagine. I don't want to crap on them, but
right. I mean, we're not millionaires either.
Like with how hard they are to market, I couldn't imagine that it's a huge pay cut. It's not like a drastic drop in quality of life.
Well, some money is better than no money for sure. But
that's true. And the Reebok deal is by seniority now, number of fights. So yeah, that is a significant chunk of money. Actually, I changed my mind.
Right, and you do have a point there. But I do agree from a fiscal standpoint, it probably wasn't a good look for them to have a flyweight division. I mean, let's be honest. There's plus 500 fighters on the UFC roster.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a lot. From any way you slice it, it's a lot. It's an overabundance. And sure, they do have a lot of cards, but look at what that comes with. You have very lopsided. The pay-per-views look like the holy grail, and then the fight night after, it kind of looks like an afterthought. Quite literally. And that's not always the best look. And I understand this was probably the best move to make from a conservation standpoint, but I do believe that there's at the very least a handful of fighters at flyweight that are worthy enough of keeping them continuing to nurture their growth. And maybe
if
UFC
they can come up to bantamweight.
Right, yeah. And if UFC is not the option for them, I mean, Rizin is making more waves. Be the next in line to fight Tenshin or something like that. Or Kyoji Horiguchi. I mean, Bellator, the same thing. I don't think they have a flyweight division, but you could find success somewhere else in the rankings, and if not, join Demetrius Johnson at 1. I mean, obviously the grass is greener some way, shape, or form. DJ just got announced as the ambassador of esports, for Christ's sake, and there's certain things that fighters can do to elevate themselves, and sometimes when you're fighting in the ugly duckling of the biggest organization in the world, that's not necessarily the best career move for you. And hopefully there's there's a silver lining in all of this. It sucks to see. Especially in a division that, whether you like it or not, has history, because DJ's title reign was at that weight, and if it goes away, it just kind of feels like he gets erased off the record books, and that's not a good way to go out. But it's an unfortunate reality of the business for sure. But let's get into the fight. Obviously, Ray Borg, Joseph Benavidez. I mean, I'm really pushing for Ray Borg. I just, from a personal standpoint, I really admire what he's been going through as a family with his son. He's had some complications with that, but he's really pulled up, hasn't asked anybody for a dime, and has just been such a respectable and admirable person through this process. And he's coming back into the ring with a serious chip on his shoulder. I do say this sometimes. I joke that fighters get like the father buff, when they become fathers, like that's like +5 all attributes. But now it's like it's double time for Ray Borg, because he showed to me a lot of potential in the loss that he had against DJ, and he's only 25 years old, which is something that people forget. I mean, he still has a lot of upside, and he showed that he can go to the minimum 4 rounds with one of the best to ever do it. And Joseph Benavidez is a person that has plenty of experience with DJ. So if Borg was able to turn it around against one of the most seasoned fighters in the game, that would be amazing. How do you see this fight shaking out?
I think Benavidez is one of those tactical, great athletes, professional hard workers that has just been a perennial title contender.
Right.
Even at bantamweight, he was a good bantamweight before he was a great flyweight.
Yeah.
But he has 30 professional fights now. Even if he hasn't taken too much damage, he's slowing down.
Yeah.
You can't fight 30 times and not slow down. Whereas Borg is not as technically efficient, but Ray Borg is young, and honestly, he looked to have Demetrius Johnson in danger a couple times. Not like straight up submission, but you're like, oh wow,
he's scrappy.
DJ is, yeah. He made it a contest, just just scrambling, hyper athletic, just dog fighting, and
right.
I think, especially because this is a 3-round fight. Okay, these fellas are the 6th or 7th fight on the card, despite being badasses, which again explains the state that the flyweight division is in.
Right.
But since it's only a 3-round fight, I don't even think Benavidez can make his cardio count, and I do think Borg can take at least 2 rounds off him. I don't think there will be a finish. If there is a finish, it's going to be on the side of Benavidez.
Yep.
But I think Borg by decision.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case, and I hope that's the case. Even though, again, I love both fighters, nothing against either one. I just see Borg needing this win and wanting this win just a tad more than Benavidez, and then from there we'll see how both fighters shake out. Obviously they're capable of bantamweight success, and Ray Borg as well. He cuts a lot to get down to 125. Maybe this bump up in weight will help him. We'll see. Either way, it's going to be a great night of fights this Saturday, November 10th. Real quick before we peace out on the podcast, last topic I want to touch on. The debate of the century, if you will. Floyd Mayweather had a really long post on his Instagram basically breaking down that there was a miscommunication on the side of him and One Championship, or I'm sorry, it was Risen, where they were talking about they were going, originally it was supposed to be an exhibition fight of 9 3-minute rounds with a fighter from organization, and it was supposed to be in front of a few wealthy spectators, and that's how that was going to go down. Sure enough, he makes his trip over to Japan, and I guess maybe there was a loss in translation. An agent at the money team couldn't properly figure out what the demand was, and I guess he gets sucked into promoting a fight in the early stages with Tension, the kickboxing prodigy. And I don't even know what to make of this. At first when the story came out, I was at a loss for words. It made no sense from a fighting standpoint for a 40-something-year-old Mayweather to step in the ring with a 20-year-old kickboxing phenom. And I don't care what the modified rules would have been. Unless it was straight boxing, Floyd was probably going to lose that fight. And part of me feels like if he was down for all of this, the money was irrefutable, he would have to say yes. And then on the flight over, he caught a highlight reel or something like that. Because Tenshin Nasukawa is absolutely no joke. When it comes to the combat of the hands and feet, his highlight reel it's almost otherworldly, just the way that he can put people out, from a variety of ways, stuff that Floyd, that's never been seen at the Mayweather gym. That's for goddamn sure. And I don't know if it was, again, it could have been, just a bad translator. They didn't iron out the details over the phone, but they took pictures with each other. It was a face-off. It was a standoff, but something happened that just, didn't pan out. And I thought it was just one of the funnier days in MMA news where we're all, looking at this, trying to process this information. Is this real life? Is this really what we're doing? And sure enough, it turned out to be a hoax. I'm glad we did this podcast a day later, actually, so we wouldn't have had to waste all this time breaking down like the real possibilities of this fight. What did you make of it upon hearing it and just everything that's happened afterwards? Like, it's just craziness.
So, I think Floyd Mayweather is the best defensive boxer of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
I've just never really cared for him.
Right.
And I'm not talking about his attitude or anything. Just like even his fighting,
Yeah.
Like and the only reason I watched him versus Conor McGregor is because I relished the prospect of Conor McGregor losing on a very large stage, and that if they delivered, that was a good product.
Right. Thank you, Mayweather.
But when I heard him fight that Floyd was thinking about fighting this guy, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I just went about my day. And then I woke up today and Floyd said, we're no longer fighting. And I go, okay. And then we went and watched the new Halloween movie. So I was utterly unperturbed by any of these developments. Right.
Yeah. This definitely not something that, affected our week here at TBL or anything like that. But it's just kind of funny, like, that's a possibility. I mean, Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers, like you said, to ever do it. And he's over here just, accepting these exhibition matches, which, would have made sense if this was an exhibition fight for a few wealthy spectators with no cameras. Then, yeah, I could see a way where you figure out a way to not get knocked the hell out by attention. But that was not going to happen with the way that they were drawing it up. So it's kind of good that he went through all this damage control, because any more, affirming that or making people believe that would have been a real thing. Ultimately, the winner in all this is Tenshin, because, Conor even made a post about him, and then Tenshin got to respond. I bet you a bunch of people went through the same, process that I did, discovering him, figuring him out, and just ultimately hearing his name and getting to stand next to Floyd Mayweather. This is the most publicity you could get from an event as a fighter without fighting.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. And I'm going to attempt to use this youthful colloquialism correctly. This debate was the best marketing campaign that he never tried to have.
For sure. And this was the guy that beat Horiguchi. Horiguchi was running through everyone at Rizin, and then this was the guy that stopped him. And sure enough, I mean, he's a prospect in his own right alongside Horiguchi. And Japanese combat sports is really in a good place if they got these guys just coming out of the woodwork with their platinum blonde hair, just styling on everybody, because who knows, that could have been a real crazy moment if he would have been able to step in there and show off his skills. But obviously Floyd Mayweather he's interested in keeping himself relevant and floating on by as a topic, and picking up a fight with Nasukawa was not a good move. So I'm glad we're still grounded to reality ever so slightly in the world of MMA. So that's good that we're keeping that as the one true constant. But I think that about wraps it up for all our topics here at the Body Lock Podcast, episode number 37. Real quick, just want to announce we will start to do video podcasts every week. The way that we've been planning to is just, things pop up, life happens, but we're definitely gonna get into that routine. It's been super fun growing in this YouTube family, this Instagram family, and we're just gonna try to keep the train rolling. Siri, any last words?
Nah. I mean, for those who are listening to us, thanks for sticking with us. Out of all of our projects, the podcast is something we genuinely have fun with, and
For
it
sure.
sucks that we don't get to put it out as much as we do, or like in the most consistent quality as we'd like. So, to those of you listening to this, we appreciate it, and we're trying to get it to the caliber that it needs to be.
Right. We are watermarkless this time, and as you can see, proper lighting on the end of Nick V. So, there are some upgrades, but obviously there's still some growing pains as well. And we're going to get through all that as a family, as a unit, as the crew. The Body Lock Podcast, episode number 37. We are out.